look at Cloud Consultant. Welcome back, episode 9, and today we're going to cover authentication methods and external identities within identity access and security. So within here, this is split into 3 parts. We have Entra, which I've covered in episode 8, you can go check that out. Then we'll have this 9, and then 10 will be the rest of identity access and security. So authentication methods. I've got here a picture of a passport, because that's like an authentication method to show who you are. And so authentication methods come in a quadrant here essentially. They lie somewhere in here between inconvenient, and high security and low security. The example here is that passwords are the worst because although they are convenient, apparently, I would argue, not very convenient because you always forget, they're also low security because there's only one hurdle for the criminal to get your password. They just have to figure that out, and that's you. Whereas, for example, here, it's more inconvenient to have passwords and 2FA, so MFA, multi-factor authentication, where you would have, say, a password and a code, because the convenience factors and the security risks are there for passwords, but then you have an extra layer of security, a second hurdle, which is a code, say, to your phone, which does make it inconvenient, however, makes it much more secure. Next up, we have passwordless authentication, which we'll get to in a moment, which is the highest security, or kind of on par with passwords and 2FA, but is the most convenient because you don't need your password. So, what does it mean to have passwordless authentication? Let's get to that in a moment. Spoilers, don't look down there. So, first of all, we have SSO, single sign-on. Well, this is where you can have one identity which you can then leverage to access multiple apps. If you've seen the Entra ID video, you can see that this is an example of app management. So you can log in once and then you have all these apps that you can then access from it, which is very common in enterprises. Next up, we have here MFA. Now this signals portion we'll talk more about in the following episode. We'll talk about conditional access. But essentially based on a variety of factors, it can request whether you want MFA or not. For example, you can go on a website and then say remember me for 14 days and it won't try to MFA. In that case, it would do the allow access route. But generally it would require MFA. MFA being, as we said, getting like a code to your phone or a code from like the Authenticator app. Now the third one, passwordlessness. No passwords. What's it called? Passwordless. Passwordlessness. So anyway, no passwords. So what does that even mean? Well, it can be like biometric data. So for example, your fingerprint, it's not a password, but it's identification. Your face, not a password, but it's identification, for example. So the 3 suggested ways from Microsoft for this, or talked about ways, are Windows Hello for Business. So this would be where you can use biometric or PIN data, which is then tied to your PC for an extra layer of security. You can also use the Authenticator app, so instead of having a password, you can just use this code. And then finally, you can have fast identity online security keys, so FIDO2 security keys. Here's an example here, which is a YubiKey, which is a USB one. Plug it in, but it can be Bluetooth or NFC, which is like your contactless credit card. It doesn't matter, essentially just some way to have a physical device, then let you know that I am who I say I am, so a method of authentication. Next up, external identities. So for B2B or B2C, which is business to business or business to consumer, you can leverage external identities. So this is, as you can see here, for example, using a Facebook account or a Google account or some Active Directory Entra ID account or something. You can use partners, vendors, suppliers or other collaborators to initialize some self-service sign-up. Basically like a kind of single sign-on. So instead of using a username and password which is within Active Directory, you can then use a trusted parties one. For example, Google's a very common one. You'll see this when you log out of websites and it'll say like, do you want to sign up with your username and email? And you're like, no way mate, but I'll give you my Google because I don't want to deal with another password. So securely interact with your users outside your org, so customers, vendors, suppliers, etc. You can ask the guests themselves or a decision maker to participate in access reviews and rectify or attest to the guest's access. so you can continually review access to see who has actually got it and who should have it or shouldn't have it. And so basically what this allows you to do is to have, say, for instance, B2B collaboration. You could have a company who don't leverage Azure products all sign in with their Google accounts using this external identities. You also get B2B direct connect, so you can, with another Entra org, you can use like Teams shared channels. So if that's another organization who's leveraging Entra ID, you can then use that external identity. So that's authentication methods and external identities. Come back next time and we'll cover conditional access, role-based access control, zero trust model, defense in depth, and Microsoft Defender for cloud.